Hey, Jocko.
Um, since you are going to leave the chat box open, I may have to turn off my screen reader. So
Mhm.
if there is any content that is going up, i.e. polls, or we're going to switch rooms, please let me know, or breakout rooms, let me know ahead of time so I can turn my screen reader back on so I can hit the right button.
All right. I will try to make sure I give you all the right cues, and Cathy will keep an eye on that too, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right. So our presenter today, Cathy Cave, needs no introduction, but I will do one anyway. Cathy, you remember Cathy from the CARES Connects that we attended in 2023. Cathy has more than 30 years experience as an administrator, facilitator, and consultant with a vast array of specialties, including cultural inclusion, equity, anti-racism work, and trauma-informed services and supports. She's one of New York State's early trauma champions, and since 2012, Cathy has worked as a senior training consultant with the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. She uses her perspectives as a survivor, family member, community member, and administrator to facilitate organizational change to improve service quality at local, state, and national levels. We're really happy to have you back on Zoom, Cathy. Thank you for coming this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Um, I'm going to do a couple things at the beginning to get us all kind of grounded and centered and in our group together. And I want to start with by an invitation for everyone to, if you can, put in the chat what's right with you today. And we will take a moment and give you all some time to do that. What's right with you today in the chat?
Hey, this is Jocko. May I do it verbally? It's hard for me to text.
Yes, absolutely. And you may do that anytime you're ready.
I would say, what's right with me today is life. Life is good, and I'm pretty happy about
Thank you. And I would, again, invite you anytime that if responding verbally is easier for you and you'd rather do that, you're welcome to. Just give me that heads up. Just the way you did just now is perfect. All right. So a few things just to name. There's a lot of appreciation being expressed for being here, being with yourself, being at peace. So I want to thank you all for sharing that.
I want to go to a pancake palooza.
It was as cool as it sounds.
That sounds
I was just
fun.
thinking about that when I read it.
I am going to screen share, so just bear with me a moment. Let's see. And the reason I wanted to screen share is because I was thinking about that when we were together in the Connect, we had a group agreement. So I thought, let me share that. And we have some folks who are with us today who were not at the Connect. So I just thought, well, let's take a moment. So thank you for sharing what's right with you. And I'm going to read the items that are in the group agreement. So we agreed to be open with one another, to offer respect and to listen to each other, to respect confidentiality. So you are welcome to talk about the content of our conversation, but not who said what, but more in general of, these are the things we talked about in terms of recovery, or this is what we talked about in terms of being trauma informed in our work. One diva, one mic. And that what that speaks to is that we want to give each other space, make sure we're hearing each other. If you have a contribution you'd like to make to the conversation, being able, you can raise your hand, and always you can put things in the chat. So I invite you to, if you have questions, to put them in the chat, to make sure that we have enough space. There's 25 of us together, for the next, little over an hour and a half, and really giving us time to think together, to be together, and to hear each other. To make no assumptions about anything or anyone, commit to learning, to create space for our differences. If you're uncomfortable, to navigate the discomfort, and if you need a break and you need to step away, go ahead and do that. We will not be taking a formal break. We will have breakout rooms, and we want you to when we do the breakout room, to make sure that you accept your invitation to join, and please join. When you're in the breakout group, make sure that you also turn on your camera, so that when you're in those small groups, they're just groups of 3. So we don't want anyone to be alone, and we want to be able to see each other. If at any point you are uncomfortable, let us know what you need. I would say Al or Tara would be open to getting a private chat if someone needs to talk about anything related to this conversation.
Yes,
I'll put my phone number in the chat as well if anybody needs to call.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. That we are all survivors in this room, and to keep that in mind, treat each other with compassion and care and kindness. And we all have some personal power, so making sure that you're using your power for good. Any questions about the group agreement? Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask folks to also add the answer to this next question in the chat. And that is, what needs to happen today for you to feel that your time is well spent? So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you have specific questions, this is an open conversation. So if you have questions, if there's something you specifically want us to think about together, talk about together, go ahead and put that in the chat. So I'm going to ask you all to do that right now. Anything that you want to make sure that we try to get to, that we think together, talk together, please do. And Jaco, if you'd like to think about what would be important for you to have happen today, for you to feel that your time is well spent, if you'd like to do that verbally, that's great.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So time well spent. What would you like to make sure that we talk about?
Would you like one of us to read the ones that are in there, Cathy?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So I'm unmuted, so I'll go. Respond, engage, and connect, said by one person. Feeling of connection is another. Adding a new tool or sharpen an existing tool. And I see one down here. Is the federal government committed to serving communities that have or continue to experience trauma as the entire community?
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else going to put anything in there? There's one. I hope to learn how to better connect with difficult clients. They may be difficult because of trauma, but also it is hard for me to connect with the clients who really do not want to stop using drugs, but are in treatment because they are mandated by courts or here for shelter and food. And then Susan Kilgore says 5 stages of recovery.
Okay. So I will think about, as I think about the things that you all are requesting, things that I definitely can talk about in ways is anything related to creating opportunities for connection. We will definitely be doing that as a large group in this conversation, but also in your small group, if you are on camera and the activity that we'll be doing in small group involves sharing, and each of you will have a chance to share in your small group. So we have built-in opportunities for connection in those ways. In terms of federal government, I cannot speak for the federal government. I'm a private contractor, but I do work on a federal project that's focused on equity. So I will share a little bit about that because there is some relevance there. And so that would be good for us to talk about. So after we do some grounding activities, I will come back and make sure to talk about what I know in terms of the federal government's activities related to trauma and trauma-informed approaches. And let's see. Connecting with difficult clients, you'll hear from me that my stance is that there's no such thing as a difficult client. There's no such thing. It is on us, because we are involved in peer support and engaged in peer support, that peer support is the one place where people can be who they are. And so that comfort, that connection brings opportunities for growth and change. So it's on us in peer support to always show up for relationship. And I also talk about it as the one gig where you can show up as who you are, and who you are is enough. And so we'll come back and we'll talk some more about that philosophy, that belief, and how to engage when people are not appreciating who we are and our intention, but also when we're not appreciating who they are and how they're showing up. So we'll talk some about that for sure. And then the 5 stages of recovery, I will not be talking about that. However, if you all want space to talk about that, I can create the space for that. And so I will check in about that a little later in our time together. Any other wishes? Oh, and thanks, Felicia, for noticing that today is Thursday. I did have to check my calendar. I was like, wait, is the weekend coming? And it's like, no, it's not. I have one more day. Oh, thank you for that. Wonderful. Is there anything else in the chat, Al, that we need to be thinking about?
I just got a message that I think was sent to me personally rather than intended to be intended for the group. It came from James and it says, the responsibility of us, the work field, to manage our trauma and not bleed on others.
Thank you so much. We will definitely be talking about that. And how I'll talk about that is under the framing of self-awareness and self-care in the same way that we talked about it during the Connect. Is there anything else before we move forward? Okay. So we're actually going to begin right now to think about this centering of self-awareness and self-care. And you're absolutely right. The purpose is that we are not harming other people because we are navigating our own harms. And so it's easy to say, but it's not easy to do. And that because of the way trauma works, so trauma doesn't send a warning that, hey, there's something coming and it's going to upset you. It's going to overwhelm you. It's going to make it impossible for you to breathe or to think. So we know that trauma does that. It just kind of, in that moment, we're feeling some kind of way. And so first we're going to do a grounding activity. And as you may remember, in the rooms for the Connects, we were creating lists of resources. And so many of those resources were to assist each and every one of us to manage. And so practicing self-care, creating our own toolbox of things that we can do, because trauma disconnects. We want activities, ways of coping that help us reconnect. Because trauma brings about this automatic response or fight, flight, or freeze, it means that we may be running from something or backing away from something that feels like it's going to be painful or harmful. We may have a freeze response, which is that in that moment, your body is frozen. Your brain is protecting you from the harm that has happened or may be present in the moment. So these are automatic responses to threat. So flight, you're running away. Freeze, you are frozen in place. Excuse me. Flight is running away. Freeze is that we're frozen in place. And then fight is that we're ready to take it on, that we are automatically in fight mode. Might look like we're actually fighting someone. It may look like we're having a big argument and we're just pushing back, pushing back, pushing back. So as an example, my wife was having open heart surgery, and the nursing team kept coming to update me. She had a 5-way bypass, so it was a very long surgery. Doctor came out and said, this is how it's going. It's going great. And after each time, my son would say to me, why are you so angry? I said, I'm not angry. What do you mean? So I'm even like responding to him with anger. I had no idea that I was doing it. I'm not angry. What do you mean? Why are you accusing me of this? And I also didn't know that I was yelling at everyone. I had no idea. So that's what a trauma response can look like. And I had no idea that when I'm scared, it comes across as I'm angry. I didn't know until my son told me that. So that was 10 years ago. So I have different ways of coping when I'm scared now. I'm better at asking for help now. So the healing process involved learning new ways of coping, learning new strategies, being able to listen to feedback when somebody says, wow, you sound really angry, like doing that check. How do I feel right now? Do I feel angry? I actually feel angry, or I actually feel scared. Like being able to name the difference was part of my own healing. So we all have our own work to do for knowing how we are impacted by trauma, trying to recognize that. And whether you do that with peers, whether you do that in therapy, whether you do that with journaling and being on your own, trying to sort out how you're responding when you feel threatened or overwhelmed, that's all good work for us to do and work for us to continue to do. So I'm still learning, and I've been talking about trauma for over 30 years. Closer to 35 these days. And so I'm never done learning. I'm never thinking that, oh, I've got this. Let me check off the trauma box. I'm good. So trauma is one of those things that because it happens all around us, it happens to us, it happens to people that we care about. And trauma is, the definition of trauma is that our capacity for coping is overwhelmed. And so what a trauma response is automatic. And so first we're going to do a grounding exercise to kind of bring us all to the day. And then I will talk a little bit more about self-awareness and self-care. And then I will show you the picture that we used in the Connects to describe what a trauma response is, just so we have a little bit of a refresher for folks. Okay, so let's do a grounding activity. Grounding really means you're connecting to yourself, and that then we are prepared because we are good with ourselves. We're in good shape to be in connection and in relationship with others. So go right ahead, get comfortable in your seat. Lean back, put your shoulders up. That helps open up your chest so that you can breathe. And then just take a few breaths in how you normally breathe. They don't have to be deep, but they can if you want to. Whatever comfortable breath you'd like to make, go ahead and make it. So in and out, in and out. Whatever pace works for you. Now notice where your back is touching the back of your chair. Just notice it, feel it. What does it feel like? Notice where your butt is touching the seat of your chair. And just keep breathing normally, but notice. Notice where your knees bend and how it feels on the front of your knee. How does it feel on the back of your knee? Notice where your feet touch the floor. And if you have shoes on and socks on, what do they feel like? If you're barefoot, what does that feel like? If it's just your socks, what does that feel like? And then wiggle your toes. Just wiggle them. As fast or as slow as you want, but wiggle them. Then we're going to make that same journey right back up. Notice your toes. Notice your feet, where they touch the floor or the inside of your shoe or your sock. Notice your knees in the front and in the back of your knee. Notice where your butt touches the seat of your chair or wherever it is you're sitting. On your way up, notice how your belly feels. Notice how your shoulders feel. Notice how your elbows feel. And wiggle your fingers, however fast or slow. Notice your neck and how your head feels. You can move your neck around a little bit, stretch out some of that tension if you're holding it. And then notice the top of your head. Take one last deep breath in. As you exhale, commit to being present. Present for you, present for each other. Okay. So one of the things that I've made a commitment to do in my work is I'm always looking for activities and cards, things that are easy for me, but also easy to share. And so there are a few different card decks that I've been looking for and looking at. And so I just want to name a few of those. And if you'd like to write it down, or if somebody, as I'm talking, if you'd like to put it in the chat, that would also be great. There's a deck of cards called the Mindfulness deck. And they are wonderful little tips of things that you can do. So in between phone calls or in between meetings with folks in between, if you facilitate groups or if you're doing more one-on-one, that before you do the next thing, you take a moment to clear your mind. And so these I ordered, it was called the Mindfulness Deck, and I found them on Amazon. And I was working with a group in New Jersey that worked with programs all over the state of New Jersey, and they were having a conference, and they ordered them at the conference and they gave them out to folks. And so just sharing ideas of what you could do with them. So you can get some for yourself. There's a probably 50-ish cards in a pack. You could share them if you're doing something one-on-one. You can actually gift them to others. You can keep them for yourself and have them nearby so that you have a resource of things that you can do in between, again, phone calls, contacts, groups, those sorts of things. Another card deck is called the REST, R-E-S-T deck. And the author of those cards, her name is Trisha Hershey. And it's really about, particularly for people of color, because she's a woman of color, that has created this book called Rest is Resistance. And then the card deck goes with, and it's wonderful ideas for making sure to rest. That sometimes we're so excited in the work that we're getting to do, especially when we have lived experience that we share, that we can also exhaust ourselves in those processes. So this is a wonderful resource that I love. And then the third, it's actually, I did share this during the Connect. It's a book by a clinician. Her name is Stephanie Covington, and she does have a website. And in her resource list on her website, there's a self-care booklet that is absolutely wonderful. It's relatively inexpensive. And there's activities, there's pages you can write in, but it's also a very small book. It's more a booklet, it's a pamphlet, it's about this big. And so I like sharing that one because it's incredibly practical, incredibly practical. So those are a few resources, but I would also encourage any of you that if you have a resource that you have found helpful for your self-care, to go ahead and put it in the chat, and we can share out some of those during our time together.
And Cathy, I put the link for the two decks that you mentioned. I'm still looking for the book.
Okay. Yeah, it's on her. She has a website that's just hers, and her last name is Covington. First name Stephanie. So the reason being grounded and connected to yourself is important is Sherry Mead is a leader. She created intentional peer support. She's the author of that approach to peer support. And one of the things she says is, in the thick of this work, we often forget about our own needs until they're so big, we can no longer meet them in simple ways. And that really speaks to the importance of, we have all been impacted by trauma. All of us, each and every one of us. So we've had systemic exposures, we've had things that have happened to us or things that we have done to others that has been just overwhelming and hard to deal with. But in our honesty, in our recovery, and in our healing process, it's important to recognize that trauma impacts us in all kinds of ways. So it's important to know, how am I impacted? So for each of us, that's some exploration to do, because the impacts of trauma can be overwhelming and large. They can get in the way of connecting. Trauma and the impacts of trauma can get in the way of how we see even our work in peer support. So what do I mean by that? Right? So peer support is this mutual space. And in this mutual space, there's benefit to both of us. Reciprocity actually means that we do something, we engage in conversations, we interact with one another because we both can benefit. Now, we don't both benefit at the same time always, but that there is in the relationship when we show up for a relationship, there's a give and take. Trauma can impact how we show up. We can be overwhelmed, we can be angry, we can be not present, we can be ready to fight and argue. And trauma, when it impacts us in those ways, again, these are automatic responses to threat, so we might not recognize that we're doing those things. So having a toolbox of things that when we do recognize, oh wait, I'm not present for the people or the person I'm with right now, that's when we do, as someone had said, because of the impacts of our own trauma, we are doing harm at great cost to people that we intend to support. So it's recognizing when you've caused harm, naming it, and that sincere apology is always going to be important. But we also need to remember that when we've shown up in not a good way and harmed someone that we intend to support, that breaks trust. And it may take a very long time for folks to then trust us, or they may never trust us. So if something I do to someone is harmful, it causes them to be fearful, causes their trauma response to be active. Some folks will call that triggering. If I do something that triggers someone else, then I can't expect that person to just trust me now. I have to re-earn their trust by being consistent, by taking care of myself, and by recognizing the harm I've caused, and then apologizing sincerely, knowing that I can't expect them to accept my apology just because I've made an apology. So that is part of what being trauma informed looks like. It's knowing that in our capacities to be human, we are human beings. We will not always be perfect. We will and have caused harm. So we have to make sure that we own the harms we've caused and that we work to not continue to be harmful. And that takes ongoing self-care. It takes ongoing recognition of how we're responding to trauma in the first place. So in our Connect, we did the self-awareness check-in. So what I'm going to ask folks to do right now, is we don't have time today to revisit this, by doing the form, because that would take away about half our time. But I do want to remind you that we did it. And I'm going to ask everyone to put in one thing in the chat that you do when you are having a trauma response or you recognize that you did have one. What are the things that you do to get grounded, centered, and connected to yourself? How do you support your own healing from trauma when trauma is happening? Let's go ahead and put that in the chat. Then if someone would help me read them as they come in, that would be great.
Okay, I can help you read them when they start coming in.
Can I do it verbally?
Absolutely, yes. Please go right ahead.
I've noticed, this is a realization that when certain things happen, I can tend to clam up. So I guess I would identify that as freezing. But whether or not I freeze or I get angry, and I'm going to have to think about if that is a trauma response. But when I do that, I normally will walk away and ground myself through multiple coping strategies. I'll get myself in a silent space and take some time for myself. Sometimes it may be 5 minutes, sometimes it may be 30 minutes, but I do what I need to do to ground myself and get back to the present.
Thank you so much for sharing. And that's the goal, right? It's not that we can prevent a trauma response because they're automatic responses. It's can we recognize them and then take care of ourselves before we engage with other folks or re-engage with other folks. So thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we have some things in the chat. I pray and read my Bible, pray and call my sponsor or accountability person, pray, breathing, prayer, meditation, step away, take time for myself to grind myself a bit, and then go back and apologize while explaining why, prayer and movement, quiet my mind, take many deep breaths, remind myself that this is something that relates to my trauma and I can work through it. A soothing cup of tea and meditate. Just intentionally stop, pause in the middle of whatever it is and settle my mind. Step away, breathe, pray. Pause, breathe, pray. Look at my feet. In
Oh.
general, I try to step away for a while and then meditate about it. I like to pause when I can, take a walk, take a break. If I can't pause, I would take a deep breath and try to find something in the present moment that I can focus on getting. The last one is I take time to reflect. I write down how I feel and what effect did it have on me and others.
Love it. Love it.
Yes.
Love it. Thank you so much for that. And what I'm going to ask folks to do during our time together and during your days to be active in practicing those things. So if we do nothing, or if we're not aware, we're likely to do more harm to people who have already experienced great harm. So when we show up for a relationship, want to make sure we're honest about that. So if I'm talking with someone and I'm having a trauma response and I notice, I'm going to say to the person I'm with, you know what, I will be right back. I just need a minute to gather myself. Or sometimes I'll say, I'm going to go, if it's in person, I'm going to go grab a drink of water. Can I get you something? And I will use that walk of going to get a drink of water and coming back to regulate myself. And so when you have mixed up thoughts, when you have racing thoughts, when your body just feels all, the best word I can think of is discombobulated, where it's like you can't get your thoughts together or you can't get your voice together, you're not sure where you are and how you are. That's called dysregulation. So you want to take time to self-regulate. And so all those strategies that you all were naming are ways to self-regulate. This is how I get myself together when I'm feeling overwhelmed, upset, or I'm having trauma responses. Any thoughts or comments, questions, anybody about any of that? I am going to,
Hello, this is Felicia.
yeah, Felicia, go ahead.
Good morning. I practice the 3 M's.
Say more.
Meeting. Say more.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I put it in the chat, but I was late after she read them. The 3 M's are meditation, medication, and meetings.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
the prescription.
And what I love about that is that when you have a shorthand for it, so the 3 M's as a great example of the practice, it's actually easier to connect in our brains and you're more likely to actually practice it. And so what are the things that help you do you? So thanks so much. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions? When we think about trauma-informed approaches, the number one thing is to start with yourself. Or how I usually talk about it is begin within. So it's always, if I'm struggling, what are the things I can do? Rather than looking to others to say, what can you do for me? What can I do? I need to recognize that I'm struggling. I have to think about what are the things I do to manage me. So that's what self-regulation actually means, that you're regulating yourself. You're grounding yourself. You're connecting to yourself. And then we can look at now, how can I be in good community with other folks, especially in my role, if I'm in peer support and my role is to support that other person or to be part of a group that supports one another. What are the things I can bring to healing, grounding, and connecting? Any other thoughts about that right now? Okay. So I think this is a good time for our breakout group. One of our other skills that we talked a lot about in the Connect is each of you made a life map. So the life map, for those of you who were not with us in the group, is that a life map starts with the day you're born. So you write down the date you're born, and then the day you're actually creating this map is the last day on your map. So from the day you were born until today, what are the significant life events that happened? So what happened to me? What did I experience? What did I do? What were the big life events that are important in making you who you are today? So I just want folks to just think about your life map for a minute, or to reflect back on your life and think about those events. So let's just take a pause for a moment, take a couple of deep breaths, and think about the life events that make you who you are today, that contributed to you being you. And just sit with that for a moment. We are going to go into breakout groups, and your task in your group is this. In your group, there should be 3 people. And if you're in a group by yourself and no one else joins, please come out to the big room and we'll put you with somebody else so that you're not alone. So you are going to have a conversation, and we're going to have at least 15 minutes to start, and then we will come back out and talk and share. But in your breakout groups, your job is this. So let's say I am in a group with Al. And the first thing I'm going to do is ask Al, is there one thing that's on your mind today that is challenging? So now Al's thinking about one thing that might be on his mind that's challenging. And then Al's going to briefly share with me what that is. So Al, what's something that might be on your mind today?
What's on my mind right now is setting up this breakout room.
Okay.
And that actually brings up a lot of issues about my performance and making sure that I do it right and making sure that I include everybody. And so my anxiety level always goes up a little bit when when an activity occurs. So
Well, thank you. And that's exactly right. It's like, it's honest and it's real, and it's what's on Al's mind right now, right? So then,
Excuse me, Al, I want you to slowly breathe and know that you're in a safe place. Listen to the sound of my voice and calm down. We appreciate it and we recognize your hard work and we applaud. Thank you so much. Remember to
thanks,
breathe.
thank
you,
you.
Felicia.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. So in your breakout group, what you're going to do is then share something from your life that might be supportive to the other person. So I would be then sharing with Al a time when I was worried about including everyone. I was worried about getting it right. And so it's not my whole life. It is one example from a time in my life that relates to what Al has shared, that is on his mind. And so you'll have 15 minutes, and we do want to make sure everybody has a chance to both have a challenge, but also to share something from your life. So try to keep it to 5 minutes or less. So first is asking someone in your group what's on their mind that is challenging, and then responding to that challenge with something from your own experience that relates. So as a trainer, I have lots of times when I have worried about getting it right and making sure I'm including everybody. So I will share with Al a time when that was my experience, and hope that whatever bit I have shared is helpful in some way. So Al doesn't need to know every time I've had that experience. I'm not sharing my whole experience. How I say it is nobody needs a whole box of Cathy. So I'm not going to tell Al my entire life story from start to finish, but I'm going to sort through my mind, select a piece. Okay. So go ahead. Let's get into breakout groups.
There are 8 rooms. There will be 1 room with 2 people in it.
Okay.
All right, here we
So
go.
please accept your invitation, turn on your cameras, and be ready to talk.
And I think that may be a second Felicia Edwards login, because I saw her log in twice.
Okay.
So I'm going to put that in the if I can. Don't know if I can. Let me see if it will let me put that in the
You're correct, Al. I got off the phone and got on the computer. So
okay.
it's just one of me.
All right, but this is the one that's talking. So are you also in the breakout room?
I'm not, I don't have an assignment yet.
All right, that's what was confusing. Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can add you. Here we go. Find you. Let me see if it'll let me do that. It shows the people who are in the rooms, and it shows participants, and it says, oh, there we go, assign to room number 7. Did that go through, Felicia? There we go. Yay. So yay, I think it's going really well, Cathy. This feels really, really safe to me.
Oh, good. Good, good, good.
It does. And when they was giving me their when I was reading the chat, those 2 that came in at 3 M's and 1 more came in, but it was basically kind of like the same stuff, so I didn't read them all.
That's
It
right.
was just
That's perfect.
the last 2, yeah, they came in kind of late.
At some point, you stop reading. You don't have.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I like to get a few responses, but when you have, if you have either more time or really small group, you can't hear, everything can't get out. So, but to
Right.
get a variety of responses is great. And it was just right. It felt just right, Tara.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
almost 5 stages of recovery. That's like pre-contemplation and contemplation, what she's talking
Okay.
about. Okay, I think I had to go look that up on the internet because I'm so distant from that process. But I know that's what the counselors and people who are doing assessments did at the hospital, and
Okay.
that,
So more along the lines of motivational interviewing, and where are people in the stages of change?
or clinical assessment as to whether they're pre-contemplative or contemplative or, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think.
I'm not going down that road.
Okay,
And I'll just be transparent about it.
cool.
Yeah, I like the way you did that. That was just cool, you know.
How cold is it up there, Kathy?
It is, well, and up until this morning, it's been really cold. Like we had, single digit temperatures for a while. But now it's warming up. It's supposed to be in the 40s between today and tomorrow, which is like a heat wave.
Mm-hmm. Us too. The temperature today is 62. And with all the rain we're having, that's very fortunate. It's supposed to get up to 68. That's
Holy
crazy.
cow, that seems wild for me.
That's March. That is beginning of spring type weather, though it's not unusual for February to have long, balmy stretches.
Mhm.
Such that we don't even call them balmy. That's a northern term.
Yes, it is. It is. And for us, we usually get a January thaw, but it was so warm at the beginning of winter. It was way too warm in the fall. And then, so right now, a week ago, when we started getting these frigid temperatures, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. But that's actually more right than,
Yeah.
more the norm, I should say, right? It's like,
A week ago we had 12. So we had our cold spells.
wow.
One of those will come through usually every year. Last year on Christmas Eve, it got down to 7, which is actually the coldest I remember in 40 years. And that caused, I go to a meditation center here. They have a beautiful building. It caused all their pipes to break and they were closed 6 months.
Goodness.
The insurance helped them, repair it.
Wow. It's kind of amazing. Just like, I'm not even sure for weather, what the norm actually will ever be. Like, I just feel like this is just such unknown territory we're in now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes me happy to be Buddhist. Impermanence is our goal, is our motto.
Mhm.
I'm gonna step away and go to the restroom while they on their breakout room. I'll be right back. And when we
Got
come back,
about 9
we're gonna
minutes.
put some stuff in the chat and then we'll read off a few of those things, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
This has been my day to learn about breakout rooms more than I had before, so that's good. I'm glad I had a good example.
Yeah, it was great, actually. But that's what makes it real, right? It's like, most of the time, unless we're in a group and we're facilitating a group, most of our peer support conversations are one-on-one.
Mhm,
So to be able to see that and how Felicia responded to you
mhm.
in real time, it was beautiful. It was
Yeah,
just beautiful.
good.
So that's cool.
I forgot to stop the recording, so this will be on the recording.
Oh, we get lots about the weather.
Do you want me to put a phone number or an email in their certificate? You want me to put your email?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay,
And then folks will have it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
all right.
And then the other thing I would say is if someone reaches out and it feels like the topic is something that would be important for you all to know, I would let them know. I'm going to share the topic. I won't share who it was or what they said necessarily, but the topic of, um, you know, talking about trauma responses or what I'll do that kind of thing, just so that you all will have a sense if
Yeah.
there's any follow-up stuff coming up.
And they prepared an evaluation, they sent me during the meeting, so if I forget to put that in the chat before people start leaving, remind me.
Okay.
I will do my best to remember to let people fill that out.
Sounds good. I just realized that I can see the countdown on my screen.
Oh, okay, you
I
can
was
see.
like, I wonder how much time they have left. And it's like right there.
Can you see the room thing that I've got open?
No.
Okay. It's interesting what we're trying to figure out how to make sure that like polls work correctly when two people are logged in and things like that. When two people, when we're both logged in as Larry, it does sometimes show only one person the poll and only one person can, only the other person can open it. So,
Okay. Interesting.
so after that countdown is done, they'll give it a minute to close the room. Okay.
Yes.
What was the breakout room assignment, Kathy? It was discussed.
To actually ask each other, so what's something that's on your mind, and then using a piece of your own experience to share with that person that's related to what's on their mind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I made it back. I know it's just about that time, huh?
20 seconds until the rooms start closing. It'll take a minute for them to close.
Blue beans, okay.
Alvin looks like he did a great job getting everybody in and out. Alvin, go.
At least I did a great job with your room. All right, people are coming back. The countdown is on for all the rooms to close, and there they go.
Beautiful.
I believe we're all.
Welcome back. Yeah,
We're back.
everybody's back now. So thank you all for that. I do have a couple of questions, but I first wanted to acknowledge something that actually Al and I were talking about while you all were in your breakout groups, is that so often when we are engaged in peer support, it's one-on-one. So we often are doing this alone, and then we don't get feedback from people right away in the moment. But there was something beautiful that happened when Al expressed his concerns and where he was at. And Felicia just, in that moment, acknowledged that Al felt some kind of way and also had some words of encouragement. And so I just wanted to share how important that was and how beautifully done it was, because we don't often get to see it because we're doing our stuff in such a one-on-one kind of way. So just really appreciating that that happened and the way that it happened.
And Barbara sent me a lovely private message as well. So
Very
thank you
nice.
all.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
nice. So there's all kinds of ways that we show up with each other with that dignity and respect and care.
Al has got me through a lot of crisis trying to log in and find stuff, and we talked a lot, so I feel like I know him personally.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you, sweetie.
And thank you for sharing that moment of reciprocity, right? That's what reciprocity looks like.
That's my superpower. It comes easy when I let my higher power work through me.
There you go. There you go. So I have a couple of questions for folks based on what you talked about and how that went in your breakout. So the first one, and if we could put answers in the chat, this would be great. And if you need to express it verbally, that's also okay. So the first question is, when you were sharing a part of your life, your narrative, your experience with the other folks, how did you choose what to share? And did anybody struggle with choosing? So when you were doing the sharing, was it difficult? Was there a challenge? And how did you choose?
Hey, this is Jocko.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, right off the top of my head, I couldn't think of anything, but I reverted to one thing that I have almost a daily challenge with, but it wasn't on my mind this morning.
Mhm.
And once I started sharing about it, it it allowed me, the way we've been looking at this as through a trauma set of lenses. Maybe the ways that I respond in this situation are due to trauma, because there's times that I do clam up, There's times that I do try to control stuff, and sometimes I can get a little bit of a fight kind of reaction. And then there's other times that I just want to say screw it and walk away. And so looking at it through trauma lenses, it gives me something else to think about now.
Love that. Love that. And that can happen for us every time we're sharing something of ourselves with other people, because it's not only what's that you're in the telling that you're seeing something differently or possibly be different. You're having a broader view of the challenge. It just gives you different ways to look at it. And it also can help us organize our thoughts. So whatever you're sharing, whether you're sharing a challenge or that you are sharing a piece of your experience in relation to someone else's challenge, in the telling, it helps us reorganize or rethink or take another look at our thoughts and our experiences. So thank you for that. And what have we got?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so a few of them, Francis, Jessica, and Deborah, they all, they had no challenge. It was what was on their mind and on their heart, whatever was weighing heaviest on their heart at the moment. And Deborah was the first thing that popped up in her mind and in her heart. Cynthia said she didn't struggle with what she shared. It was what she's dealing with right now. And I do have a lightness or heart after sharing with my group. This is awesome. Another one is my group narrowed it down to today and what was on our mind. A challenge in not having prayer with my favorite daughter. That's her challenge, not having prayer with her favorite daughter. And the group listened and offered support through sharing, and then they prayed with her. Wow.
That was right.
God, that was amazing.
This is powerful stuff and from a training exercise. I just want to say, this is powerful stuff. Oh my goodness.
And Susan Maxwell's hand is up. Susan?
Yeah.
I have my hand up because the keyboard is up front and I'm back here at the table. But anyway, I shared what was on my heart, what's going on personally right now, but I shared it surface. And Jonathan was like, you want to go a little deeper? That, he wanted to share on it, but what situation was really going on. And I didn't mind sharing it, but I like that Jonathan recognized that because I did it intentionally.
Okay, so we have another one that said I kept mine to something that I knew I would not have a lot of trouble sharing about. It was a little embarrassing and uncomfortable because I like to think I should be able to handle anything. And Doreen shared that I did have two things to share, and I chose to pick the one that may make me useful to be helpful to the situation as a whole that involved others and not the one that was totally just about me.
So there's a lot that's involved in sharing. There's a lot. So there's how vulnerable do I feel? How much do I trust the folks that I'm with in sharing this? There's this process again of sorting and selecting. So even if I'm talking about my own challenge, I'm going to consider, who am I talking with? What's my relationship with this person? Do I trust them? Can I trust them? Sometimes things are so overwhelming that people I've never met will just tell me things because if they don't share it, they're going to burst. And so often I will say to folks, when that happens where they don't know me well, I tell people a lot, you don't know me well enough to trust me. But if they do trust me with something personal or hard to share, or that it's a struggle, I reassure them in the moment that I thank them for sharing with me, because that's a gift. When somebody shares their heartfelt stuff, their struggles, that is a gift. And so I thank them for the gift of the sharing. I let them know that I will keep it confidential, unless there's something they would like me to do with them to tell someone. And otherwise, it's not my story to tell. It's not my experience to tell. I'm the container for it. So it's thinking about that. When I'm working in peer support and someone tells me something that's a hard truth, what I do let them know, and this is on before they tell me anything, is that as part of my work, I will keep what you tell me confidential. The exception is if I need assistance, if I need some support, I will talk with my supervisor about it. So it's the confidentiality does not mean that you are, when you're working, that you're keeping things from your supervisor. Confidentiality does mean I will not be sharing with random folks in the grocery store, out in the community, anything that you tell me. But we do need, when we're providing peer support as part of our job, we then may need to make sure and be just open about, yeah, any sharing of anything that I do will be with my supervisor. And I also don't need to mention your name, but I may talk about the situation so that if I have resources, if my supervisor might be helpful in gathering some other resources, I may share it in that way. But the important piece is to be transparent about it. So when you are responding to someone who has shared with you, and you're selecting a piece of your experience to share back, was that difficult? What was that like for you? And again, go ahead and put things in the chat. And if you'd like to verbally share, that's also fine. So when you offered something from your experience in response to the other person, what was that like for you? Everybody shy now?
So actually, I would like to share that, when I shared my experience with my group, one of the girls in the group with me, she was able to share the exact same experience. Well, not the exact, very similar experience in her life. And the beauty of it was the outcome of my experience as well as hers was a positive outcome, through going through and doing the work that was necessary to get to the other side and get through the trauma or the traumatic experience. We were both able to do that. And we both received a positive outcome as a result of that. So that was pretty cool that we were able to share that experience with each other, a very similar experience, and have the same outcome. It was very validating for me, actually. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Like you touched on a lot of pieces, right? So there's the, hey, wait a minute, I'm not alone. Other people have experienced something similar. And the validation of we can heal. We not only survive this, we can thrive in this. And that too is validating. Love that. So when we share our hope and inspiration, it's beautiful. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm coming from the chat now. It's one of the responses is I felt that it was pretty easy because that was my part. What my partner shared was relatable and it was easy to talk to her. Another one is it was not hard. We were all going through similar situations and emotions.
Yes. And that is the beauty of peer support. It's when we live our lives out loud in this way, and we're doing a few things when we share. We demonstrate that we actually listened and we heard what the other person was saying. So even if I didn't have something similar, I could say that, I didn't have that same experience, but something similar. I mean, I think we've all had times when we felt unsure. We've all had times when we felt scared. We felt uncertain. We felt loved. We felt held. We felt supported. You know, having someone actually hear what you're saying, and even if the experience is different, to be able to relate to it sends a message, you are not alone. And how much of so much of our lives, when we've had our own struggles, can be seen in such a negative light. That, oh, you know, I had this period of 10 years when I was a mess, or I didn't show up for others in the way that I did. Some of my things that I've done were harmful. To be able to turn that around to, even from all of that experience, that the good in it is that I could say something that was validating to someone else who only sees the messiness of their lives or the challenge of their lives and isn't hopeful about the outcome, where sometimes how we show up today is acknowledgement of hopefulness and optimism.
We have a couple of more. So I often worry that something I say may not be helpful, even though I'm trying to be helpful. I try not to share my experience with a similar situation rather than what I think or what advice I have. No, it
Wait, can we
was,
pause there for just a minute?
yes.
Cool. So let's talk about this one, because I think this too is very real, that we worry. So the one thing I would say about the process is, if you are listening to what the other person is saying and you have a time when you felt that way, that's the thing to share. We're not giving advice. And so giving advice is different. Giving advice is, you should do this, or you must do this, or the only way to feel better is to do this. So in peer support, when we are sharing our experience in response to a challenge that someone is having, it's all, you start from that I place, and either you've had an opportunity where you felt similar or you didn't, and you be honest about that. But hear what the person has said, validate that you heard them, and then don't give advice. I can't tell anyone that the thing that worked for me is going to work for them, because we don't know that's true. We don't know everyone's whole story or anyone's whole story. But to validate a time when you had a similar feeling is powerful. And you can also then use curiosity. So sometimes after that sharing, I'll just ask, was that helpful? You just ask the question, and either person is going to say, you know, I think so, or no, or I'm not sure yet. And that's okay. Stop yourself from telling people what to do when you are sharing in response to their challenge. There are other spaces where you can talk about your experience and it's all about you. But in peer support, when you're sharing in response to someone else's distress or pain or confusion or sadness, whatever they're sharing, what you share is not about you. It's about what of your experience would be validating to them right now. Does that make sense? And so
Yes.
that's how we share. Go ahead.
Okay, there's a couple more. No, it was not difficult. My group was very supportive and encouraging. I felt like our group were predestined. We connected and listened and was heard. We have another one. There was an ease and we connected over similar experiences. And then we have a praise for Al. Al is anointed to assign breakout rooms. My group was so relatable. I felt safe, secure, and supported. Thank you, Al.
That was our higher power called Zoom who assigned us breakout rooms. It was not.
I love it. I love it. And it's amazing how often, and I would also say that there's a power of peer support connected to that as well, right? It's like when we live our lives out loud, we actually have so much space to connect, to feel those commonalities, to feel like, hey, I'm talking exactly with who I need to talk with right now. Peer support has that power in it because we live our lives in this out loud way. And so just thank you for all of that sharing. Any other questions, thoughts, or challenges about anything that we're talking about so far?
I'll say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just know for me that before the CARES training, my go-to is to like almost overshare my experiences. You know, I have that Rolodex of all the things that I've been through that it almost comes out as me sharing my experience is almost a comparison, you know, of whose was more dramatic or large, you know, whatever. So I'm grateful that going through the CARES, you know, is always first because I have learned how to reel it in and keep it about the person that's sharing with me. And I can be an instrument and a help and not just this back and forth, you know, who did this better or, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So,
yeah, thank you so much for saying that. One of the ways I talk about that is that we can get involved in either the trauma Olympics or the oppression Olympics. Oh, that happened to you. Let me tell you what happened to me. And so it just gets bigger and bigger, and it can escalate into everybody feeling so distressed. The other thing that brings me to thinking about this way is very early on in my connection to peer support, I had an experience. And so I was in a psychiatric hospital and I'd been in some extreme distress. And then when I got to the hospital, I slept for like 3 days. And that 3 days of sleeping, I felt so much better after I had some sleep. So now I'm ready to go to like, okay, what can I learn? What do I need to learn? That's always my thought. It's like, there's a lesson in here somewhere. I need to find it, right? So I started looking at what groups they were offering on the psych unit. And there was one group and it was labeled, you know, it was about peer support, and someone was coming from outside to facilitate. So the guy comes in, and again, I've slept for 3 days. I am so full of energy now. I'm ready to go, right? So he talks about himself for an hour. I honestly couldn't tell what the purpose of the group was. So the next day, there's another group related to peer support. It had a different name, and I'm not remembering. And the same guy comes and he does the same thing for an hour. He told the exact same experience as he had the day before. So at that point, I was like, well, if this is what peer support is, I don't have time or patience, because I was excited about learning, and I felt there was so much I didn't know about my own experience. And I was just like trying to figure it out. So the end of the week, I get discharged from the hospital. I didn't go to any more groups because I was like, okay, this is a waste of time. And the peer support program where this person was from is actually right across the street from the hospital I was in. And so I went across the street and I asked some questions about what is peer support, and that I had come from Samaritan, which is across the street, and, you know, just talking. And what occurred to me was that not that he was a bad guy, because he's not a bad guy. He was actually a really very warm, kind, sharing person, but had no idea about how to share. So there's, in the peer support training at that point in time, there was a lot, and this was on the mental health side of things, there's a lot of live your life out loud, share your experience. So he did what he thought he was taught to do. So I became the training director for that peer support program, and I taught them how to do it differently. You know, it's much more about what resonates for the people we're supporting than it is about us and the sharing. And that's also important when we understand the impacts of trauma. So when we understand what trauma does to folks, it invalidates. It leaves you feeling not as worthy as other people. It makes communication very difficult. Trauma makes it challenging to know what you need and know how to get it, or to be even makes it hard to accept help from other people. So trauma has a lot of impacts that can last over the lifetime, but also can reach deeply into all parts of our lives. So because of trauma, and I didn't know it then, I mean, my kids are now 36 and 39, but when they were 5 and 2, I didn't know much about trauma. I was having flashbacks. I couldn't get them ready for school and for daycare. I couldn't get them their breakfast. I couldn't do the things that were so important to me for parenting. And I love parenting. Grandparenting is even better because you get to just spoil them and then send them home. But parenting, I was all about it when my kids were little, and I couldn't do it. And it was friends who loved me, who knew how much parenting was important to me, that came to my house every morning for 2 months and helped me take care of my kids, but kept me in the driver's seat. They didn't make decisions for me. They asked a lot of questions about what would be the next thing you would like help with. They were deeply curious about what did I need to do the things I was most proud to do. So their helping wasn't about, let me do this for you. They didn't give me parenting advice, even though all of them were parents. They kept me in the driver's seat while they said, how can we help? And at first I didn't really know how they could help. Like I wasn't sure what I could say. But what I learned really quickly is I could pick out my kids' clothing the night before. And what I needed from them in the morning is, how about, what do you want the kids to have for breakfast? And then, is it okay to help you get them dressed after they have breakfast? Or do you want them to be dressed before they have breakfast or after breakfast? So like they kept giving me choices that kept me making decisions, but I had to learn how to trust that. That's what peer support does. There's not advice, there's curiosity. There's not me telling you what to do. It's me supporting you to make the decisions about what you need to do. And if you ask me for advice, all I can say is this worked for me, and it doesn't always work for everybody else. So you'll find your own way, but I'll walk side by side with you. And that's truly what we're doing. It's that walking side by side. So learning how to, even if there's something you think you know what's the right answer for them, how can you ask a question rather than be telling them that? So how can you be curious? Anything else that y'all want to talk about related to what we've been doing so far? Okay. I'm going to screen share. Bear with me one more second. Okay. As I said earlier, I wanted to share the diagram. We are wired for survival. So this talks about trauma responses and how they actually show up. So I wanted to spend some time here with you today to really think about, when folks are having a trauma response, what is underneath? And we've talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to come back to it. That a trauma response happens when something in our environment overwhelms our capacity to cope. So it could be something that's happening, it could be something we see or hear or taste, or touch or smell. So that's the sensory piece that, something that we experience in the moment is bringing up that trauma response. It also can be something that my friend Wilma calls her spidey sense. It's that internal, something is happening and I don't know what it is. And the story that I've shared, and some of you may have heard this story, is that one time my wife and I were in New York City and we were in Chinatown going to a restaurant that we love and enjoy and have been to many times. And we pulled down the street and parked the car. And all of a sudden, as I'm getting out the car, I open the door, I'm starting to get out, and I'm hearing this, or noticing rather, a feeling. I can't name it, I don't know what it is, but just, it was like every clanging bell in my brain was screaming, it's not safe here. I don't know what it is. I don't know what was about to happen. All I had said to my wife is, we can't park here. And she said, what? And I said, we can't park here. So I didn't have a reason other than my spidey sense is saying, do not get out of the car here. And because she knows me well enough to know that I'm not going to let this go because it's such a strong feeling. There was nothing scary that I could see or hear or taste or touch or smell, but my whole body was just on alert. And we left, we parked somewhere else. So to this day, I have no idea if there was something that was happening that I couldn't see, but I could sense, or if I felt like something was about to happen. I have no idea. But in that moment, I was absolutely sure every alarm in my brain was sounding. So we get this information. Our brain takes it in and sounds the alarm. The alarm then activates us or triggers us for fight or flight or freeze. So these are automatic responses to threat. You don't control them. They are, when we were still in the land of saber-toothed tigers, these were automatic responses to threat. Something you hear, see, taste, touch, smell, or just your intuition is talking to you, brings about the desire, and the action is automatic. You fight, you run, or you're frozen in place. And you're not choosing how you respond. It's automatic. I would love to say that my abuse led me to fight back. That's not what happened. I was frozen. And my initial experiences of abuse and violence are somewhere between the ages of 2 and 4. I didn't have a thought. My body froze. And so that's how that works. Sometimes people are aware of how they're responding to threat, and sometimes they're not aware. And sometimes people's responses are visible, and sometimes they are not visible. So sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. So there are also responses that we learn, and these are socially learned responses. So what does that mean? What that means is that if, for example, I was a victim of domestic violence and I could hear the way my partner was coming in the house and jingling their keys, if they were in a good mood or if they're in a bad mood, because I'm listening. Because those experiences are traumatic, they're painful, they're awful. I mean, I can't keep my kids safe. So all the things that are important to me are saying, what's the mood like from my partner that's coming in the door right now? And if those keys are jangling, you can best believe that I'm going to try to keep things as calm as possible. Sometimes people will call that feigning, meaning that I'm going to defer to that person. I'm going to do everything that I can to keep them calm so that I stay safe, my kids stay safe. Sometimes people will say that because of our trauma histories, we automatically befriend people. Right? So I don't know anything about you, but I'm going to be your best friend so that you're nice to me. Those are two examples of socially learned responses. It doesn't mean that I would rather be with an abusive person. It means I'm trying to keep myself safe and trying to keep my children as safe as possible, because maybe leaving is not an option. And so when I know a little bit about domestic violence, and I work a lot in that space, one of the things I will share with you is that when people leave is often the most dangerous time for them. So we can't guess. And this is also the reason we don't give advice, because we don't know somebody's whole story. If someone is sharing that they have been victimized by domestic violence, the best thing we can do in peer support is ask would they like some resources that can help them. Make sure you have those numbers, because we could be guessing about somebody's motives, why they're doing things the way they do, why are they behaving the way they're behaving. And sometimes we might give some advice, and the advice we give would be more harmful, puts them in more danger. So when somebody is disclosing that domestic violence and sexual violence are part of their trauma, part of their abuse histories, even if it happened a long, long time ago, refer them to the folks who know a lot about that. So you make sure that you have resources for the domestic violence program, for a sexual assault program, things that you can share. And so in peer support, we can still stay connected and in that relationship, but when folks are struggling with some of these bigger issues, somebody's being victimized at work, you want to have access to resources that support that, so that you're not the expert on someone else's experience. Again, you're partnering with them and you can offer. So again, with curiosity, have you ever talked to a domestic violence advocate? Here's a number for a program in our area if you're interested. We're not saying you must. We're saying there's other folks out there and we're offering choices. Any questions, thoughts, or comments about any of that so far? So when people are experiencing a trauma response, we need to keep in mind, again, what I was sharing earlier about trauma looks different from the outside than it does from the inside. So if inside I'm feeling scared, or I'm feeling angry, or I don't know how I'm feeling, what you might be seeing is that I don't have my thoughts together. You might be seeing that I'm canceling appointments, because sometimes flight looks like not showing up. Sometimes fight looks like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to anybody. Why are you bothering me with this? Sometimes freeze looks like, I just want to be in the space with you. I don't want to talk. The first peer support group I ever actually attended was a, other than the two in the hospital, was a Al-Anon meeting. So I was in a meeting. They had several nights a week. I probably went to 1 or 2 a week for 6 weeks. I didn't say a word. I sat in the back and cried, and they let me. They welcomed me. Someone came up after every meeting and said, I hope you keep coming back, even when I didn't say a word and just sat in the back and cried. Sometimes people offered me tissues. That how you show up and who you are is not always a representation of what's going on inside or what your struggle is. It tells you nothing. So I promised that we were going to come back and talk about difficult clients. This is the reason there's no such thing as a difficult client. If someone says, no, I don't want to talk with you, we let that be okay. They're driving. Survivor driven means that however they're showing up, I'm going to still try to stay in relationship with them. Sometimes what I've said to folks who said, I don't want to talk to you, I'll say, is it okay if I just sit with you? And I've probably said this more than once. There's a clinician that did some really good work around how we show up and are in relationship with folks. And one of the things she says is, don't just do something, sit there. Sometimes it's truly that we're in relationship and we're not doing a whole lot together. We're still in relationship. As long as we're willing to be side by side, we're still in relationship. So there's no difficult client because it's not our role to be judging where somebody's at. In a trauma-informed approach, we're judging nothing. So if you're in a conversation or in a relationship and you're not feeling safe, the question becomes, how do I manage myself? And then you can think about, where do you meet? Is it public? Is it in an office? Is it around other people when you're meeting one-on-one? If someone that you're supporting has harmed you, you do not have to stay in relationship with that person. But if it's the what if it happens, we need to find ways to stay in relationship. Because the what if isn't based on what the other person is doing. The what if is based on our own fears and our own discomfort. So you can offer, I have a friend and I would like to bring my friend when we meet. You can try those things. You can offer and make choices. Would you like to meet at our office or would you like to meet outside in a park where there's people? So you always have a right to your sense of safety, but also to think about and be aware that that's what's driving your decision making. So if I'm afraid because I'm talking with someone who yells a lot, when I'm trying to arrange where will we meet, I'm going to ask, is it in person? Is it virtual? I'm going to think about that. If it's in person, I want it to be at the office so I'm not here by myself with this person because I want to stay in relationship because that's my job. I'm here for peer support. It's my role. It's what I do. And there's lots of places we can do that. So McDonald's becomes popular as a place to meet, as an example. We can do those things to feel more safe, but unless the person has actually done something to us, we need to stay open to the where, the when, and the how we meet. If we're judging that someone is a difficult client, we have to look at what makes that difficult. Maybe it's they remind me of somebody from my past who was harmful. Maybe they're not in their recovery where I am in my recovery, or where I hope they are in their recovery, where I wish they were. So we need to always remember that we meet people where they are, not where we wish they were. When we are doing the judgment thing, you're not recovered enough to be worth my while, even if we're not thinking that that's the language we would use, there's that feeling that's attached. We start to question, is this person worth my time, my energy? Somebody else would benefit more. That's not what peer support's about. We're not measuring success by who jumps through the hoops we set up. It's truly about how do we meet people where they are and walk side by side with them in our recovery and in theirs, wherever that is. Any questions or thoughts about that?
Cathy, I just want to say I probably, difficult is the wrong word. I mean, I meant it, but what I'm referring to is clients that aren't motivated to stay sober, that actually are in treatment but are planning to get high again. And it's just so frustrating to spend hours with them and basically just be like trying to communicate why you think that sobriety might help them, but them being unwilling to hear it, or they hear it but they don't seem to agree. So that's what I meant by difficult. So
Sure. No, thanks, Jonathan. I greatly appreciate that. And the same holds, right? It's like separating out our own frustration from that person's recovery journey. Still showing up for relationships, still walking side by side with them, acknowledging for myself that this is frustrating, but also reminding myself my job is not to dictate anybody's recovery. So I can look in the mirror and say, oh my goodness, my next appointment is with somebody who I feel frustrated with. So one, it's naming your feelings to yourself with I statements. The frustration is mine. That person is where they are. And so we can offer options, we can share choices, offer choices, excuse me. But again, we can't control where they're at. And so people are where they are. And again, our role as in peer support is demonstrating recovery, living our own recovery, sharing pieces of our journey that I think would be helpful, especially if there's been a time where I was where that person is at right now. How many of us were at a time where recovery was not a thought, but I was court ordered. So I'm going to go to this program because if I don't, I'm in violation. So even when somebody says yes, so they're not in violation of a court order, that is something to acknowledge as a step. And that's a choice they're making based on their preferences and what the facts were in front of them. So it's frequently true that someone may be in treatment when treatment is the farthest thing from their minds. I would rather somebody talk to me and say, I'm here because I was court ordered to be here and I don't want to violate my court order. That is a truth. So I'm about celebrating that truth or acknowledging that truth. And if I share a story, it'll be about when I was in that place in my own recovery, where I was saying yes to things, but not because I felt like I had a choice. Or I felt, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, you finish.
Or I felt that it was two bad choices, right? Like neither one of these choices are what I want, but I'm going to go with this one because this is going to keep me out of trouble. That's a choice and it's an action. So we can still validate that even if we disagree. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we had a couple of things in the chat before I know it's getting late. So someone responded and said, you're planting a seed when they aren't ready to heal yet.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else says, so true. It took me 10 years to put 2 consecutive years together.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else shared recovery on a journey. We may be at a different mile marker, but we are still here together.
Yes.
So I just wanted to get those out to you.
Thanks so much.
And Jocko has his hand up.
Great. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Jocko. Jocko, did you have something you wanted to share?
Thank you, Alvin. I couldn't find the button.
No worries.
Yeah, a couple things I wanted to mention. You know, on you know how you mentioned one, like it's not up to us to decide who deserves our time, or who's worthy of our time. Could our time be used somewhere else? Now, I know in a typical setting, that in a typical peer support role and agency setting, that is 100% true. But recently, my RCO, we have the ability now to take in peer support and provide that first intervention to inmates in a jail. Okay, now, so these inmates, a lot of these inmates are going to be just looking for someone to talk to. Others are going to be, maybe mildly or extremely serious about their 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 actions, or what they're going to come into, or what they're going to once they leave incarceration. So, in this sense, as peer supporters, we are going to have to do somewhat of an evaluation to figure out if these individuals are just wanting somebody to talk to, or are they seriously looking to get help or assistance in their life. So, that's I mean, on one hand, like I said, like what you were saying, in a normal situation, or I don't know if normal is the right word, but the typical ways that peer support is received. I agree 100%, but I have to remember, though, when we are in this setting of serving individuals who are incarcerated, they may be just, we're going to have to do a sense of assessment at first. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because we just have a couple of minutes left. So what I wanted to respond to that by saying it might be really good for a CARES Connect or additional training on justice involved peer support.
Okay.
And if you all are interested in that, I have a couple of names of folks that I'm happy to share with you, because it does
Please.
create some additional challenges. So I'm appreciating that. And so thank you very much for bringing that up.
Yes,
Cathy, please send us that information.
yeah,
Sure.
please. Yeah, we would. Yeah.
Yeah, I've
I
got a
would love
couple
to.
of good folks that I can definitely send your way around that conversation.
So are we out of time, or do I had one other thing?
And we've got, what, a minute left, I think?
It is
Okay,
11:59. So
I'm not gonna take that minute. Y'all do y'all's wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. I do want to mention one other thing. So we did have a request for talking about the 5 stages of recovery. Since that was not a conversation in our CARES Connect, this really isn't the time or space for it. And I meant to say that earlier when we first came back from our breakout groups, and I forgot to say it. So I will own that. It's something that if you are interested and have more questions about that or anything else, you all will have my email. You can email me questions. You can ask for resources. I can send things your way. So thank you all so much for your time and attention. Al, do you want to talk about the evaluation?
yes, I just dropped a link for the evaluation in the chat. We would appreciate it if you would all click on that and give us your feedback on this presentation. And I see that one person might have already. That's awfully nice. Thank you guys for responding. So you'll get a certificate from me in about a week, or maybe earlier. We'll see how things go for the rest of the week. Jocko, did you have a question?
Yeah, would you please email me that survey link, because it's difficult for me to find stuff on the chat and then activate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So Cathy, thank you so much.
You're welcome so much. Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Mhm.
Cathy, please send me your information.
It will be with your certificate. It will be in your certificate. Same email.
Thank you, Ms. Cathy.